All right, Luke, you want to go ahead and get us started?
Oh, sorry. There you go. Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's probably good. As long as Trump keeps going with his, seemingly endless stream of victories, we can probably just start there. So I guess to begin, has anyone been keeping track of the exact total of people that ICE has detained at this point? It has to be in the low 5 digits at this point.
Yeah, so on their I know on their Instagram, I think on their Twitter too, they've been posting daily deportation counts. I think since the inauguration, and it's gone up to about 1,000, 1,100 a day over the last couple of days. I know Trump put out another order today requiring them to bump daily numbers up to at least 1,800. I'm sure that's gonna continue to ramp up over time.
Yeah. I think if you do the math, if you were trying, well, I'm not even sure if this would get all of them, but certainly to make a meaningful dent, I believe the number was hovering around 20,000 a day, which seems very unfeasible. I think you could ramp up to it over the course of a few months, and I wonder if that's the direction they're heading.
Yeah, it definitely seems like they're going to be trending upwards as the infrastructure for the mass deportations continues to be built. I think we're going to see pretty much a continual, gradual climb until we start reaching the 5 digits a day.
Now, when we say infrastructure, are we still at this point just talking about military buildup, or is it about building sort of a system with local law enforcement? Because to me, that seems like the biggest gap right now.
I think it's kind of all encompassing. We always made it a policy objective, but actually implementing it's the difficult part because you need detention centers. You obviously need means of transportation. And then you really just need a large body of law enforcement officers that are out there, enforcing the deportations. We're going to need not only the federal agents, but we're going to need state and local police department out there helping out. I know there was a some sort of a memo or order passed the other day that's allowing state and local law enforcement to have immigration enforcement powers. That's probably going to go a long ways. And
Yeah,
I think the military as well under I think it was the Alien Sedition Act. I'm not entirely sure.
I think it's the Criminal Aliens Act, which is similar. It just gives enhanced powers towards aliens who have broken the law. And Trump's line is, I mean, I think this is a pretty reasonable legal argument that if you are an alien who came here legally, I mean, you're just a automatic criminal. But of course, a lot of these people have committed additional crimes as well. In fact,
it was the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Continue.
okay, yep. That's also been reinforced. So this is a good add-on to that. So two big updates on this front. One is the Laken Riley Act was signed into law today. Big benefit of that is that it sort of goes back to what we were just saying about it. Sort of strengthens the illegal or the Criminal Alien Act because now it allows, actually it requires law enforcement to automatically detain not just violent criminals, but criminals who have been convicted of any sort of theft, including shoplifting, and not just convicted, but actually like credibly accused. So even if you haven't been sentenced, you're still required to be detained. So that even takes care of low-level crime. The other thing too is I think you said we're sending the violent offenders to Guantanamo, but we'll see how that goes. I'm not sure what the criteria for that will be.
Another thing to add on there, you also have to think about self-deportation, where if it becomes too inhospitable to live and thrive in a host nation, if you can't just go to a hospital and get seen and not get deported, then you have, make it where it's not feasible to stick around. Your kid can't go to school for free on the taxpayer dole. You can't just get unlimited medical services. You can't get all these free housing benefits. Where if that starts drying up for them, I could see something like that also just kind of pushing folks out a little bit as well, where it's like, well, why stay here?
Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was saying. Well, there's also the deterrent effect, which has always been the appeal too. You might not be so eager to make the attempt in the first place. if you know that your stay could only be 2 weeks, plus you get a criminal record. So there's that too. And then also with Rubio wanting to realign the military more towards the Western Hemisphere, I think we'll see more movement south than vice versa, which is definitely a great change.
I also saw earlier with the self-deportation, if they're actually caught, apparently they're no longer eligible to get a visa in the future. Like that would include a work visa, any kind of possible green card. No, obviously I'm not sure of all the ins and outs of that, but that was one of the reasons why some people started self-deporting.
Do you know if that was just an executive order, or if that was part of the law that was signed today?
I don't know. I don't have all the info on that. That was just something I saw off the cuff.
I will say one other thing with the Lake and Riley Act, and maybe this was talked about and I just didn't pick it up, but I hadn't heard this detail discussed as much. It's a great example of kind of liberals paying attention to the wrong thing, which they've been doing recently. Sort of like how they've been paying a lot of attention to Elon Musk's kind of salute deal, which, whatever you think of it, is ultimately minor in the grand scheme of things. And they've been kind of ignoring Trump's other actions. Similar example here. So a lot of talk about the Lake and Riley Act allowing people who haven't been convicted but only credibly accused of being detained. I haven't heard as much discussion of the fact that that law also gives basically anybody in the United States, or at least any citizen, the right to sue the federal government for not enforcing immigration law. And it's pretty wide. The statute gives you standing to sue if you've suffered $100 or more of damages, which basically means if you've been the victim of a crime in any capacity by an immigrant, you could sue the feds.
And that's especially interesting because we have actors at the governor and state level openly defying this order now. The mayor of Minneapolis told criminal illegals, "We love you. We care about you. You're a neighbor. Our police officers will not be cooperating with federal law enforcement." Well,
We'll see.
I'm looking forward to seeing how well that works out for them.
So I would like to speak to that actually, if it's agreeable to the gentlemen assembled.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we've been hearing a lot of talk in the past couple of weeks. Hey, fellas, this has been too easy. You know, where's the inevitable leftist response? Where's the deep state? Where is this? Where is that? And I think we've been, a lot of us, and not all of us, but I think a lot of us are so far into the frame of, and can you all hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have gone so far into the frame of, we're so under-equipped, so underprepared to deal with, these elites. These elites are so powerful, et cetera, et cetera. But I really think they were just quite simply outplayed here. I think that they're certainly cunning and ruthless, but I don't necessarily think they're as competent as a lot of people would like to give them credit. And they don't, it feels easy. It may feel easy now, but we've forgotten the past, 10 years plus, and the prospect that, maybe, we can learn from our mistakes, or at least we can learn from the people who came before us who made mistakes. And I think this, speaking to the, our police officers will not comply with this order. I think that's the best response that they have. I think that's the only response that they have, is just ordering general noncompliance amongst their groups. I don't know if I have like a sort of rhetorical flourish to end this on, other than just to state, they will at some point collect themselves, but right now enjoy it. They're in total retreat. They're in total disarray. They're demoralized. They don't know how Trump is doing this. They're not used to fighting this. This is a whole new kind of political warfare. And the best thing to do, and eventually they'll figure it out, but the best thing to do right now is attack, 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 attack. They're collapsing on all fronts. Attack, attack, attack. Grab as much ground as you can. before they regroup. And Trump is very much doing that. And all of you as anons, as posters in the culture war, you are a foot soldier. Even if you feel like you're just sending tweets, no, that's actually, strange as it is to say, that is a not insignificant part of the apparatus that allows Donald Trump to do this. So I know that was a bit extended, but that's just generally my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
You are hiding enemies of the state in the basement, are you not? As the reggaeton music gives them all away.
Oh. No, honestly, I started to wonder, or I started to have a suspicion that the country might be primed, especially for the immigration question being addressed in some way. When the Lake and Riley Act received, I have to check it again, but I think the act received, it was at least 63, maybe 65 votes in the Senate. Which means that there was at least 11 Democrats who voted in favor for it. And, like those guys have their own elections they have to win. And I'm guessing they were probably sensing some sort of push even from their own constituents to kind of take care of some of these things. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, part of it is too, yeah, like that's the whole benefit of posting, like each individual post doesn't really make a huge difference in itself, but it creates an environment that a lot of people interact with, at least indirectly, where these sorts of ideas can sort of not be suppressed and even flourish. And so that does have an organic impact, even if it's a couple of ways removed from the average person. But no, it's a good thing, and yeah, we need to keep pressing this as far as we can. I'm not sure when the spell will break, but as far as we can see, we can just keep going.
Until it does, and it will become apparent when it does. Until it does, just go for broke. It's the same way that the OGC has been like rapid fire expanding over the last year, without necessarily, going back to fill that territory in. And we're probably going to do that at some point as we start refining. But that's how these things work, right? You have periods of massive growth and then periods of refinement, And right now, for the first time in a long time, we are in a period of massive growth. And the right answer to do when you're in that period is keep pushing. Go until you hit a wall. And once you hit a wall, use that as the sign to stop, collect yourself, and then once you've stopped and collected yourself, start doing a value analysis, start seeing, what is there to do next? Is there something else I have to be doing right now? So, anyway.
Well, one thing on that note that I think we could sort of keep in mind is, I don't know how exactly analogous these two scenarios are, but the attitude right now around Trump sort of reminds me of the first 2 years of Barack Obama's administration. Because when he came into office, he had a ton of popular support. His party controlled the trifecta, I think even more strongly than the Republicans do now. And, like, eventually that faded. Once 2010 hit, that was kind of that was a wall. He lost the House, and I think they lost the House for a decade after that, or something close to that. But one thing that Obama did do is he passed one major landmark legislation, Obamacare. And Obamacare is still here, and it's not going to go anywhere. I mean, we might wish it would. I don't know. I feel like the right has sort of grown ambivalent to it, and maybe for good reason, but it's not going anywhere. The Lake and Riley Act's a good example. There's probably even stronger than that act, though. We probably have the opportunity to pass one or two really strong pieces of legislation in the next 2 years. That should probably be like the meta goal for the next 2 years, especially before we hit midterm season. So we'll see how that goes. It's a good thing to keep an eye on. Well, our guest tonight is Mr. Harvey Wallbanger here from the Virginia chapter, and so I was wondering if you'd be willing to give us sort of a breakdown of what the situation is in your area.
Well, thank you for the intro. As you said, I'm Harvey Wallbanger. I'm president of the Vetus Dominium Club. That is the OGC chapter in Virginia. By the way, let's get our shilling done, boys. I'm surprised you didn't open with some shilling. If you're in North Carolina, join up with these fine men in the NathanaelGreeneSociety. If you're in Virginia, I want to hear from you. Link to email is on my profile for joining up with us. If you're not in either of our two states, go to TheOldGloryClub.com and explore the chapter page for the chapter nearest to you. And if there is none, then guess what? It's up to you to create one. The OGC is the way of the future. We're bringing America into the modern age with the new civil society. Let's get to it, gentlemen. Anyway, oh yes, and thanks for pointing yourself out. We also have a Northern Virginia chapter now for the wider Nova DC region called the Bluestone Heritage League. Its president is Zenraf down there in the listener section, but he doesn't have a chapter Twitter account yet, so heckle him for being lazy. Anyway, in Virginia, yeah, we've got a, how do I say this? A dark future politically. It's a damn shame because we have so much momentum and optimism at the federal national level that I almost forgot how bad it is in Virginia. Right now we have Youngkin, who's done a pretty good job. You know, there's things I could critique him on, but overall, he's been the best governor we've had in a while. It's the next one. The current lieutenant governor, Winsome Sears, is going to be the candidate for the upcoming gubernatorial election, the GOP candidate. And nobody's contesting her. She's already secured most of the endorsements from all the power players in our party. I don't know what to do about it because she is a terrible candidate. She's unelectable. She's a never Trumper. She didn't even endorse Trump for re-election this go around. And I think she's going to lose horribly, and we're going to hand over Virginia to a Democrat trifecta. They'll have the governorship, the legislature, and the judicials. And it's not looking good because even right now, there are bills trying to be forced through at the state legislature that Youngkin's veto is the sole determining factor preventing all of these bad things from going on. For example, there's SB 1031, the study bill, as it's called. This would strip parental rights for choosing their kids' education, which is a huge issue for the homeschooling community, and it's impacting us directly here. Many of my chapter members are eyeing the exit if this or a bill like this gets passed, and I frankly can't blame them. Been blackpilling for a second here, so anybody got comments or questions?
Are you saying you wouldn't be able to opt your child out of public school?
The criteria that they use to determine whether or not parents are allowed to homeschool their children, the biggest one is the religious exemption. I'm pretty sure this gets rid of it. If it allows the state to have such power that they can review each case and make their own determinations on it, which is, so if they don't find enough empirical evidence, this is me reading from the bill directly, that indicates religiously exempt or home instructed students are receiving an adequate education, they can take action and force your kid back into public school, which is terrible.
That is terrible. And with such a dark candidate from the GOP, do you think there's any future going forward for the state?
That's an interesting point you've brought up. Some little bit behind the scenes baseball. We're trying desperately to get Winsome Sears contested for the Republican nomination because it's not a done deal yet, but there have been nobody to cast the die. Nobody has stood up and made a stand. It seems like the GOP has collectively Yeah, I got the joke, man. I'm just not taking your bait. Okay. I told these hosts I'd be a good Christian boy because they're nice, not nice words I want to say right now. Okay. um, yeah, it seems like the state GOP is totally giving up this cycle, and I don't know why. Um, we have a unique situation in Virginia. Governors cannot run for re-election in consecutive terms. That's why Youngkin is not up.
Now that begs the question: do you think any of the potential policies from the Trump administration regarding some gutting of the federal government, or if he goes through with the plan to begin relocating agencies, do you think they'll have a large enough impact on lessening the population of Nova to have any sort of impact on state politics?
It would be a good start, but I'm not sure if it would, have enough of an impact to really make a difference for this upcoming election. Maybe in the next cycle.
That is interesting. Now I remember back in 2020 or 2019 going into 2020, back when I still lived in the state, when Northam was trying to pass all his insane gun legislation. That was back during the sanctuary county movement, during the whole Second Amendment kind of crisis in the state. Really, I think we kind of underplayed just how big of a event that was in Virginia. But anyways, one of the things that come out of that was the secession drafting, I guess you could call it, of some of the western counties. I don't remember the exact counties, but it's mostly the ones along the West Virginia borderline. And I believe the state of West Virginia has some sort of a standing invitation to many of the counties in Virginia to join with West Virginia in the case of some sort of event in the state of Virginia. Um, do you think anything like that is viable potentially as a exit uh, from the state for some of those hard red counties?
Well, as a true Virginian, I must declare that West Virginia is illegitimate and belongs to Virginia. That being said, Godspeed to any of those counties that can make that happen to protect the rights of their citizens. But yeah, I think all of those, all that insanity we saw, the anti 2A stuff is going to come back full force, um, unfortunately.
It'll be interesting to see, really, because the last time that happened, 2019 going into 2020, we were really at a much less polarized time. This is pre George Floyd, pre really any of that stuff. We're kind of at the peak of the Trump presidency, and even then, the Virginians were starting to, get really riled up over their gun rights. And I wonder, 5 years on, if whatever hard left candidate comes in, I guess this would be 6 years on at that point. I wonder what the reaction of a lot of the Virginians will be, because I feel like since the precedent is there for the sanctuary counties for the Second Amendment, I wonder if that's just going to kick back up, if it's going to go any harder than it did last time around. I feel like that'd be really interesting to see what happens at the local level, especially.
Yeah, I'm not giving up Virginia without a fight, but just saying how I see it here at the ground level, the energy is just not there. Um, so hopefully we'll just get through whatever they inflict upon us and we can take it all back next time. But this should not have happened in the first place, is my point. We are not even fighting here at the state level. For some reason, the GOP is just fully surrendered without a fight. And that is my take. The Winsome Sears candidacy is she's just a fall girl. They're going to set her up to fail.
What is so here in North Carolina, we've struggled with our governors. For our last two governors have been Democrats, but what's saved us is our House and our Senate. What do you know what your situation like that is there?
We have some of the most radical left legislature in the country because there's no such thing as a moderate Democrat anymore, especially here this close to the heart of the empire. all of the legislators on the left, they're pro-transing your kids, they're pro taking away your guns, they're pro everything evil and wrong, and I guess the few moderate Democrats that were remaining, all just lost the support of the party and are no longer, holding office. Mr. Shallow, you're a fellow Virginian in exile. You have any read on the situation you'd like to contribute?
Nothing good.
Nailed.
For those of you who follow my tweets or read anything that I, put on the timeline, you'll know that my primary avenue of approach to discourse is through a military strategy point, but really, military strategy can be applied to statecraft generally. If you're strategizing from the point of view of a heritage Virginian, of an old stock Virginian, of a founding Virginian, someone who has state heritage that goes back a very long way, it doesn't look good for us because unfortunately Fairfax County runs the state, and Youngkin, from what I understand, did everything he could to break up those vote farming. But really, it's just when you dump like the entire world into Fairfax County, it's there's nothing much you can do. And I believe, saving grace, I believe that the Virginians have a kind of opinion about themselves in a sort of Quixotic Patrick Henry view of the federal government, despite being so close to it, which is admirable, but also very foolish. This is not the 1700s. I think if the federal government wanted to, they could absolutely crush these counties. But a great deal of western counties and rural counties, I'm not so bullish on anything on the other side of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's very possible that they could take West Virginia's standing invitation and immediately become the wealthiest counties in West Virginia. Bristol in the Southwest Virginia area has more in common with nearby Kentucky and Tennessee than it does with the rest of the state of Virginia. So, that's assuming nothing ludicrous happens, like, all I don't want to assume. Let's just say there's some demographic changes within the state of Virginia. All right, some hefty, significant ones. Assuming that doesn't happen, the state is more or less cooked. There was a prediction made on election night that the state was going to flip, and I think it very well could have. It's just a matter of they didn't. And I think when I saw that, I realized, oh, Virginia's lost. Assuming current trends continue, there's nothing much we can do. We can absolutely have a fighting. I'm not saying not to fight for it. I moved down to North Carolina. I didn't move to the friggin' West Coast, and I go to Virginia more often than ever. But I don't know. I don't know what can be done. I think the only thing that can be done really is that the aberration that is the District of Columbia be broken. That the capital be moved, agencies be moved, something. The problem is the imperial capital, Imperial DC, needs to be broken and needs to have its disparate parts spread across the country, and that's the only way Virginia will cease to be anything other than a extended suburb of the imperial capital. That concludes my statement.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see. And I'm still holding out hope that we get a reaction like we did in early 2020 with the whole lobby day and sanctuary county movement, but I'm not really sure either. There seems to be a sort of indifference from a lot of the GOP types, even down to your average voter within the state. Outside of our types, it doesn't seem like A lot of people are very concerned, and that seems to be a general trend with a lot of your more normie conservative voters. Um, there's this sort of idea that you show up to the ballot box and you vote for Trump, and then you're good to go until the next presidential election cycle, and that's just simply untrue. Local and state elections matter just as much, if not more, than the federal elections. And Virginia having its state elections the year after the election cycle, it's never really good for the cause because you lose a lot of that galvanization, a lot of that spirit that you carry in the federal election cycle because frankly a lot of people just don't care to go vote the year after a major election. It's really a miracle that Youngkin won in 2021. After the debacle that was the 2021 or 2020 election. Um, but I feel like if anything, it's a lot of complacency within the GOP voter base. That's not helping anything, certainly.
Well, the alarm bells are being rung, but it seems to be falling on deaf ears, and we can put a cap in it there, I suppose, and move on to the next topic. I don't want to take up all of tonight's on Virginia blackpilling.
Yeah, I guess we can move on to some white pills. We can talk about Trump putting 30,000 Browns in Gitmo. Someone want to kick that off?
Based.
I don't know a whole lot of details about that. By the way, Harvey, thank you for everything that you shared. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Yeah, don't mention it.
About Gitmo, I don't know a lot of details about it. I kind of just caught the headline almost right before the stream started. The one thing I will say is that does sort of seem to... I mean, really, the conflict in the Middle East is pretty much completely over anyway. Repurposing Gitmo for that purpose, though, definitely feels like a symbolic, final nail in the coffin on all that.
Yeah, it's definitely strategically placed. I have a feeling that this is like a temporary detention camp, such that illegals flown in from whichever state, probably funneled through Florida, Texas, some of those Gulf Coast airports, kind of using that Gitmo facility as a layover before they get sent to Venezuela, Colombia, so on and so forth. I have a feeling that that camp's going to be focused on those South American immigrants or migrants versus the ones that we're sending directly back to Mexico or Central America. Either that or maybe they're just creating a facility kind of along the lines that El Salvador made, I believe, 2 years ago where they stuffed all their MS-13 members in. So I think there's really two ways of looking at that. Either one is good.
Yeah, I had sort of wondered out loud before, why no one had considered sending all the illegal immigrants just en masse to Guam. A state that a territory that couldn't vote. This is better though, because Gitmo's never going to become a state. It'd actually be really funny if it did, but it'll never become a state. Whereas Guam maybe could. There's also
I think the 8D chess strategy here is to put 10 million illegal immigrants in Gitmo and then immediately sell it back to the Cubans and make it their problem.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. I mean, you brought up El Salvador. I know Trump recently floated just paying El Salvador to put our guys in their jails. Well, I mean, illegal immigrants, but also maybe our actual less admirable citizens could be exiled there.
Honestly, man, it's a great idea, really. El Salvador has proven itself to have probably the best incarceration model in the world, with just complete dehumanization of prisoners. We shouldn't be treating prisoners like they're worth any qualify that. We shouldn't be treating murderers and rapists like they're worth anything at all. And if we are to keep them alive and not have speedy executions, which you can argue for that all day. But if we are to have a system like that, following the El Salvadoran model is in my opinion the way to go. And if that means shipping all our prisoners over there and paying them probably 10% of what it costs to house a prisoner here. I think that's a good thing. Honestly, I'd much rather see U.S. aid going towards that than buying condoms in Gaza.
Well, in the meantime, before we can get rid of all of the people currently here, we also have the issue of the fact that this new Birthright executive order, I forget exactly, is it March 1st that it goes into effect? I think it is. Maybe April 1st. But either way, there's now people rushing to get inductions and C-sections so that their child can get that Social Security card before the order goes into effect.
Yeah, that's just a microcosm of the situation we're in today. We really are kind of in that last chapter of the camp of the saints with all of these hundreds of thousands of millions of effectively human biomass crossing into our borders, doing everything possible just to get that magic soil, that magic card, and cutting your baby out 3 months early just to have the chance at making them a citizen. It's insane, man. It's really just showing how desperate they are to really push through with that.
Well, depending on whether they actually allow it or not, which is probably a little bit of an open question, but if that is allowed to happen en masse, that's an indictment of our own medical system as much as anything else. But hopefully someone like RFK can fix that. His nomination is happening now. It's a little bit painful to watch.
Oh man, that
Yeah.
hearing was great. Listening to was it Elizabeth Warren's psychotic meltdown? That was just music to my ears.
Yeah, that was one of like 6. It was hard to watch. RFK did fine. I mean, it was just the
There was an RFK quote that I really appreciated today, and it was while I believe it was while Warren was grilling him. It might have been one of the other banshees, but the topic was brought up as to RFK, are you taking this job so that you can go into private pharma industry after, create yourself a cushy job? And his response essentially was, I don't need this job. I have a good life. I'm doing this because I want to, and I want to make Americans healthy. And I think that mindset is exactly what we need within these cabinet positions. RFK, I believe on multiple occasions, has come out and said, he's not doing this because he's trying to, advance in Washington. He doesn't need that. He's a member of the Kennedy family. He's landed. He could live a cushy life all he wants. He's really just dedicated to coming in and trying to fix the health crisis in this country, and that's especially within HHS and FDA and all that. That's like a huge departure from any other secretary we've really ever had in the last, really within memory. It's always a revolving door into pharmaceuticals or whatever food industry or seed oil, so and so far and so forth. Or in his case, it's seemingly an altruistic goal in mind, and I think that's going to really shake up the department.
Yeah, it's a continuation of the sort of paradigm that Trump started among many. Really kind of pushed back against the narrative that really Democrats have pushed for a long time, but Republicans had really embraced it too. This idea that you don't want rich people in office. But of course, it took someone like Trump to come along and just say, why would you not want to hire someone who just doesn't need to be bribed? Like Kennedy doesn't really need to be bribed. Trump doesn't really need to be bribed. Elon Musk doesn't need to be bribed. Who's going to bribe Elon Musk? You want people who are independent enough that you can trust their claims to public service. And we'll see. The Kennedys haven't always been, the most moral people on earth. I'm sure Robert has a lot of skeletons in his closet if someone really took the time to look. But no, I think he'll do a good job in the position, assuming he gets nominated, which I think he will. But I think that vote, I'm not sure when that'll be, probably a week or so.
I mean, the public health crisis is absolutely something that needs to be fixed. But in all honesty, what I'm more interested about with the RFK hearing is just how far Trump is willing to go in this very conscious Andrew Jackson LARP. Today he found a way to tell that, one judge, I'm going to follow your order to the letter in a bad way. I'm gonna follow it. I'm going to make. I don't know. He basically told this judge to enforce his own ruling. And that's what I find interesting about this. Robert F. Kennedy is kind of a big spit in the face of the DC establishment, but everything he's been doing is that it's not only a spit in the face. It's he's attempting to completely reshape how politics is done in Washington D.C. And that's not a small feat. It is not a small feat, and it's not done without risk. So I don't know. I'm really, I guess what I'm just interested in is how far he's willing to go.
Do you think that this is a change in Washington that would be overall benefit? So there's sort of the main school of thought that I see is that Trump is willing to break all these norms in sort of a gamble to fix things before the Democrats can go back and abuse these new norms to make things worse. Do you think that's the situation we're in, or do you think the way Trump's or I would argue improving Washington, but maybe you could give your opinion on that. Do you think the sort of new norms that Trump are establishing will just be better for the country in general, no matter who's in charge, or do you think it's just a desperate gamble?
A desperate gamble on who? I mean, Trump is absolutely like a once in a generation, once in a lifetime, really historical figure, and the fact that the fact that he's done this much so quickly is, I don't know. I in terms of whether it will be good, I can't speak to that because I don't believe in. I believe in ratchets, in minor betterings, but I don't believe that one grand system is necessarily better or worse, like than any other, or one way of doing things is better or worse. Now, I mean, within limits, within the bounded rationality, what I'm talking about, obviously, it's just it's in the sense of how politics is done. I don't necessarily think what Trump is doing or what he's not doing. I think it just changes how the game is played. Really, I don't think I don't think it's necessarily good or necessarily bad. I know that's not an exciting answer, but it's just a thing, in my opinion. Sorry, I'm also playing. I'm playing Kaiserreich while I'm in this space, so my attention might also be split.
What's your current run?
Well, I've been banging my head against the wall for the past 3 weeks trying to win as the American Union state in the last patch, and it's been made nigh on impossible. And I've tried 15 different kinds of strategies, and I'm currently trying another one. I had a breakthrough today. This is what I think about at work all day. What is it? But I had a breakthrough at work today in terms of my army composition, and I'm trying that out, and it's somewhat working so far. I haven't gone on the offensive yet, so I'll report back later, but I'm not going to pollute the space any further.
Yeah, we could talk about Kaiserreich for hours some other time. Anyways, moving on, let's go back to North Carolina. Let's talk about some of the stuff we've seen in Western North Carolina recently. I guess before we do anything, we should probably plug some of the efforts over in Western North Carolina. Currently, OGC member Jay Ford is running a I guess donation request. He's got a Amazon list. We'll link that in the thread for this space here shortly. But the effort still it's continuous in the western part of the state. It's very cold up there. A lot of people are freezing. As Ford says, the new administration they're spinning up, they're ramping up their capabilities, but it's still going to take a little bit of time to get out there in force and really fix the crisis. The crisis is ongoing. Recently, there's been a pretty major wildfire sparking up in the region. I guess a lot of this deadfall from last September is drying out and fueling this fire outside of I believe it's the Swannanoa Black Mountain area. I'm not sure what the status on that is currently, but yeah, the effort's still ongoing. They're still looking for donations. I'll go ahead and link that here in the post for the space.
Well, with Trump at the helm of the national relief efforts, I hope this time we can see what a speedy and sufficient response is in massive justification. Contrast to what happened over in LA, where they just kind of let the fires grow and not turn on the water. And then Trump gets into power, and what did he do? He just turned on the water. So, praying for the souls afflicted by this new natural disaster, and let's get it done. Thank you for all the support, Mr. Ford, and I see Mellon in the chat as well. Mellon has been a standout guy contributing to the OGC response force down in Northern Carolina.
Yeah, and it's important to note it's not just North Carolina. East Tennessee is hit pretty hard as well. Some regions of Georgia and maybe some of South Carolina, but especially East Tennessee has kind of gotten overshadowed throughout the whole response. I remember during the initial response when we were when not me, not you, and I were doing some road reconnaissance for the county we were in. Every time we crossed the border into Tennessee, when we were checking if border crossings were intact, every time we cross, it just seems like the devastation would get worse. This is up in Sullivan County, Tennessee, over near Mountain City, um, and hopefully it's gotten better. I know there's a big gravel quarry up there, and they were churning out convoys of dump trucks full of gravel to get roads repaired and whatnot. But it's definitely going to be a long recovery time. I've seen recently that, and this might just be conjecture, but I think it seems to be a trend. A lot of the FEMA guys are actually going around door to door and checking in on people getting insurance, I guess, adjustments done. That's one of their primary functions in disaster response. I'm not sure what the status on those are. I know during the previous administration, FEMA loved to do blanket refusals on pretty much all insurance valuations. That personally affected some of my family members, and hopefully that's not the case anymore. But I know there's a renewed effort to get federal resources up in there, bypassing some of the roadblocks, some of the what are most likely self-imposed roadblocks from the previous administration. It seems like the federal regime doesn't want Republican voters dead anymore, which is a good thing. So I'm hoping we'll get some renewed efforts, some more funding into the region.
I mean, what else is there to say? The regime doesn't want Americans dead anymore, real Americans dead anymore. It's crazy, you know. And what's even crazier is that for the last I can't remember how many years, for the last however many years, it's been like almost a point of religious faith. You can't win by voting. You can't fix this by voting. You can't fix this by voting. You can't fix this by voting. I mean, I don't know, guys. Does it like what do you guys think was the number one thing that brought this about? Yeah, sure, Trump's. I'm not denying Trump's preparations and his team and his plan, but what brought this out?
Yeah, this is exactly what we voted for. Um, if anything, this really galvanized the voters in that region. A lot of people were angry, and a lot of people are still angry. Rightfully so. When this first happened, and the government was dragging its heels, the first couple of weeks and really continuing onwards, it just massive animosity towards the federal government, for their response, or more accurately, lack thereof. And to see a strong figure come in and say, I hear you, I will make this right, and then come in power, and within the first week and a half begin to make it right. I think that's huge. And really, that's how you create a population that is willing to die for you. Such a downtrodden, historically forgotten about population is Appalachia. To see a president come in and within that first week, go on the ground and hand the podium over to local residents and hear their problems straight from the source, instead of some think tank in DC telling them what to think. That I think that's huge. I think it's monumental. It's a very, very big thing to see.
The last great populist politician that went and tried to make himself a man of Appalachia and listen to Appalachians' problems. You know who the last one was?
Who was that?
It was FDR.
Yeah.
Well, at least this president can stand up for himself.
That was bait, and you fell into it.
Yeah, well.
Well, I mean, I guess this might count as shilling a little bit, but your point about how maybe voting actually is how you fix things. I mean, that's sort of the idea of the OGC, right? I mean, not so much voting in particular, although we do always encourage our members to be civilly engaged in that way. But really, the whole idea that, like, you don't win by losing, you don't win by having a loser's mindset, you don't win by just, becoming bitter and inactive. Betting on the OGC, if you want to put it in those terms, is really making a bet that you can be just an, in a sense, an old-fashioned civically engaged citizen, and you can just win that way. And that's kind of the gamble we're asking all of you to make on us, for those who haven't joined yet, and that's the pitch we would make to you.
Well, what's crazy is that it's amazing. Like until they start sending troops to your house, it's amazing how much that actually, like if you're just the George Bailey civically involved citizen, it turns out that actually works.
As Jay Ford likes to say, you can just do things.
Yeah, that's actually one of the benefits, honestly. I felt like there was like maybe a 3 or 4 year period on kind of the online right where everyone talked about being deracinated all the time. But honestly, I don't want. It's hard to say it's a benefit of deracinization. Obviously, if you take that too far, things fall apart completely. But there is this sense, and it almost is reminiscent of the frontier, just a little bit, not completely, but just a little bit. That like you don't have to, because like say 70 years ago, you probably just grew up and lived in the same town you grew up in. You probably did a similar job to what your dad did or something related. You might take over a role in the shop. Now there really is a feeling that you really can just do anything, which a lot of people don't take advantage of, and they kind of fall by the wayside. But if you're willing to kind of step up to it, there's so much you can do. Again, without kind of going into like weird fantasies, you can just be like, a law-abiding guy, and you can do all sorts of things because that's just the way America is now. And you can either be victimized by it, or you can really just take advantage of it.
Yeah, power is good when we use it, and I think people are starting to finally realize that. Speaking of power going down to the individual citizen, we're seeing sitting U.S. senators as well as the son of the president floating the idea of letters of marque for dealing with illegal aliens and cartels, specifically the cartels. Um, and I saw, I think it was Eric Prince uh, directly respond to it saying he was standing by. So maybe we'll see those come out. That would be a very interesting addition to the timeline.
Um, do you know, for people who are maybe more familiar with the history of those sorts of endeavors, do you know what historically the protocol was for when, or whether this even was an issue in the past, when most of the contraband is illegal? Like, not just illegal for, tariff avoidance reasons, but illegal just across the board. What the protocol was for issuing letters of marque there? Because, if you're part of, one of Eric Prince's death squads and you know, seize a $500 million worth of cocaine, like, you can't sell it. So like, would the government have to just give you a market appropriate bounty for it? Like, I'm not sure how that would work. It's a good idea. I'm just not sure what the details on that would be.
I think it just depends, really. I'm not even sure if there's a historical precedent for that necessarily. I'd assume it would just default to U.S. law. Um, if you're acting under, um, a letter of marque like that, typically whatever um, articles of war or whatever you're operating under will spell out specifically what you can and can't do and procedures therein. I'd imagine if you're, you know, coming across 500 million in product, you'd be forced to dispose of it in some manner. Um, but coming across other spoils such as money or properties, so on and so forth, I'd imagine if assuming anything like this ever gets passed, I'd assume those would be fair game, much more so than product.
I'm imagining some country boys getting into this just for an opportunity to get a free pickup. But I mean,
Well, a free Hilux with a 240 mounted on top of it that the ATF sold to cartels through the Fast and Furious program wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But I think what we'll have to see about that really. I think those are probably on the fringe for now. We'll see how it develops in the next few weeks. I think if anything happens in the region, we're more likely to see some sort of a um, punitive raid than we are letters of marque going out necessarily. I think some of the current incidents down at the border, including that exchange of gunfire the other day, if stuff like that continues to happen, and based on the stance of the current administration and the posturing, we might potentially, correct me if I'm wrong here in the next few weeks, we may see some sort of a special forces incursion or something along those lines into the region, doing some sort of HVT hits or more limited raids into certain cartel areas. I know the Mexican government and their current president are very much against anything that the new administration is doing. But it's important to note that that current president of Mexico is bought and paid for by the cartels. She was placed into her position of power by, I believe, it was the Sinaloa cartel. It might have been the Jalisco, but 37, I believe, presidential candidates assassinated in that race. Um, so I think whatever stance the U.S. government takes towards Mexico, we should be treating it as the rogue cartel state that it is, and not taking their government seriously in any manner.
I mean, like, you're being serious about 37 presidential candidates getting assassinated during that race?
Yeah, I think the hard number is 37. I remember that being quoted. They
There,
were just getting assassinated left and right.
there were also several local politicians that were executed as well. I don't know what the number, but there. I mean, it was outrageous. It was almost, I mean, comical. The amount of people that were being assassinated during that election that happened to supposedly benefit her.
Oh, I mean,
Allegedly.
I mean, like,
Allegedly.
that's like a Looney Tunes cartoon level of. I mean, that's ridiculous. It reminds me of Do you remember back in like 2018 when Trump made that when Trump apparently insulted Haiti and a bunch of liberals got really bent out of shape about it and they're talking about how great Haiti was. I remember when that happened, like Anderson Cooper brought on his old substitute teacher from like high school and he was Haitian and it was just kind of to kind of ham up the story. But that substitute teacher like decided to take advantage of his 15 minutes of fame and he moved back to Haiti to run for president and the current president of Haiti at the time had him assassinated during one of his speeches. I guess it's just the way things work down there, but
It's not surprising, man. It's the entire dynamic down there is just violence and blood. You know, and an election. You know, the old saying goes that voting is violence. I think that's from Starship Troopers. But down in Mexico and really the entire third world, voting is quite literally violence. Um, you know, a presidential campaign in Mexico might have a casualty toll to the entire 21-year period we spend in Afghanistan, and that's just daily life down there, and it's insane.
well, um, let's see. We did have a couple of questions that were submitted to us in advance. I thought maybe we could go ahead and cover those. Um, I don't know if you got a chance to read over Wade Hampton's question. It's a little bit longer. I don't know if we need to read the whole thing, but it's definitely wondering about what we can do. And I don't know how much we can speak to this directly, but what exactly are things we can do on the local level to sort of help? You know, Harvey's been talking about how Virginia's in a rough spot with their politics. North Carolina, like we were talking about, has struggled the last, I would say, at least the last four years, slash last two elections to really win races. What are the sorts of things that we can do? Again, I don't know how directly we can speak to that, but anybody here with expertise, what does that kind of look like?
What things you can do locally?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it just depends on what are your goals. You know, whenever you ask a question, it's like, oh, what can I do? Well, that's so broad of a question. It's like, you know, you need to know what it is you're trying to do. What it is, what is the outcome you are attempting to achieve? Um, because you know what is strategy? Strategy is just a map from where you are now to where you want to be. It's that simple. You know, it is. Yeah, I mean, I can't make it any more.
Well, here,
Go ahead.
let me clarify his
Um,
question a little bit further. It was a little bit more specifically to do with like, how do you channel sort of base enthusiasm, like, I mean, as in the enthusiasm that Trump is enjoying right now among the wider population. How do you especially get those guys kind of channeled in on the ground floor? Like, what are kind of initial steps? What are even things to look for, at the very kind of bottom rung of these systems?
Yeah, I think with the initial steps for that, it really starts at the local level. And I know one of our officers, Colt, wrote that guide, essentially how to become a delegate in your local GOP and how to go up from there. And I think that's really where it starts. You know, you gotta go into your local GOP because that's where your state candidates are elected from, or at least nominated from, and then work up from there. You know, a local institutions are really the keys to power, and you've got a much easier chance of making yourself known, making your influence or growing your influence if you start at your local delegation and move up from there. And I really encourage everyone across the board to join whatever your local county or district GOP is, and start influencing that movement for the better. Because typically a lot of those institutions are some of the most like um, boomerified movements out there, and not necessarily but by design, but simply because a lot of guys our age and of our mindset just aren't out there making themselves known. So start at
Yeah,
that
really, the
local
big one
level.
is to show up. That's the most important thing, because you can really just do things when it comes to riding waves of enthusiasm. And with waves of enthusiasm, you also have to keep in mind that the standard is also going to be a lot lower. Like there's still going to be a standard, but you're going to have to be able to meet that before you actually go and show up. And if you're looking at, influencing the base that way, then that means that you need to know what you're about, what your talking points are, and you need to just simply show up and be a competent person, because every single location needs 5 or 10 more competent white guys showing up to actually do the thing in local politics. And if you ain't doing that, then you ain't doing that. So it could just simply be a matter of if you're not as involved as you should be, you should do that. Speaking about that, I've got maybe about 5 minutes, but then I got to split. So if anybody's got any questions about the local area in Western North Carolina, shoot them to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ford,
can
why
you?
don't you give us a rundown of the recent developments?
I mean, there's not really much to really go over that you can't see through the spectrum of social media. I mean, there's, of course, executive orders that have been put out, and that means that it directly translates to boots on the ground, stuff on the streets, and planes in the sky. I've seen 3 or 4 C-130s out in the regional Asheville airport that I'm out of, and I've seen dump trucks going around. That's been on social media, and I've also seen troop movement, and I've also seen a lot more enthusiasm along the ground too, especially in the Swannanoa area where Trump showed up. But just because those things happen, it means that there's probably going to be more scrutiny on the local organizations that have popped up here that are still around, such as the United Cajun Navy or the United Christian Rangers or Cabins for Christ or the other things going on. And one of the big things is that you saw a lot of great people show up around the first couple of months, but then it was either they got roadblocked out or they couldn't deal with particular edicts and governors, and so they either split. And a lot of the people who are hanging around now, they're still doing deliveries and continuous wellness checks, but the manpower is significantly lower. The capacity to do those wellness checks and get those supplies out to people has tapered off, but you also have the government coming back to fix it. So it very well could be those cases that maybe Trump will actually fix everything, but that remains to be seen. Of course, I will still hold him to the standard that I want him to be held at. And I mean, that's basically the rundown of the situation right now. As of right now, we've paused all operations with OGC specifically, just because we don't exactly have a point of distribution, nor do we have a steady housing location where we can have volunteers. We've been working with other organizations that are still down here to do stuff, but it's really more of a warm handoff of saying oh yeah, you can mention that you're OGC, but don't tell them it's Old Glory Club, and don't tell them all about us if you don't feel comfortable doing that. But it's they'll go out and they'll go into the field and they'll be great people, man. And every single member of the OGC who has shown up here has been a force multiplier and been a really hard worker, and has been incredibly useful to the organizations that we have partnered with and worked with to actually get work done. Now, granted, some of that work is a little bit, cosmetic, and sometimes the work is, done by people who we don't necessarily feel great giving it to. But as long as people are actually down here actually helping, people are seeing that and they recognize it.
Well, that's good to hear, man. It's good to hear that things are progressing down in the region. How's that wildfire Is that contained? Is that becoming a bigger problem?
There is 0% containment on it as of right now. I believe there was 150 acres that were currently caught on fire. They are managing the direction of it, but I imagine that it's just going to have to burn out. We've had at least 7 houses caught up in it. Not 100% sure if there's been more since I last looked at the update about an hour ago, but I maintain that it will probably continue to burn. A lot of the surrounding counties do have their fire departments on it looking to contain it, but this was something that was called months ago because of just the debris and the level of dry wood that's out there now, especially in the dry winter that we've had. We don't have a lot of snow out here right now, so.
Interesting. Well, hopefully.
Question, Mr. Ford. And I'm sorry for interrupting you, but
No,
I have
you're
a
good.
question. Do you think that what you experienced up in Western North Carolina, with the OGC's relief efforts up there, and with not just helping the people up there, but the more macro way of looking at it, do you think what you experienced up there is reflective of, future catastrophes, future breakdowns of central authority, of political authority, and do you think that lessons can be taken from that and preparations can be made for future events based off of what you experienced up there?
Absolutely. So the first and primary thing is that you always have to be ready for a disaster wherever it strikes. And that should be probably the most common natural disaster around you, but you should at least have food storage on hand, just because when a golden horde situation kicks off, you don't know whether or not that food needs to be saved or like you need to like rely on it for a good long while. And there's also the thing to be shown that the people who actually had strong communities out here were taken care of much better, because the people who had strong communities and were able to talk to each other, they were able to quickly orient themselves and get points of contact for other organizations to reach out to, and it became much easier than having single individual people go to distribution points. As far as it reflecting some sort of larger conflict or something like that, I very much think that God works in types and archetypes, and this is certainly a type of an archetype that we will see. It won't be something nearly as similar to this, as unique as this. Of course, there are always ongoing disasters everywhere around the world, but ultimately, the people who had the most impact out here were the people who didn't really take no for an answer, who were able to go out and do stuff, and people who had the right intentions, which was just helping anybody, no matter where or who they were, and they had like as long as they had a heartbeat, they were being helped. Even if they were, homeless before the storm, even if they were, drug addicts, those people are the ones that actually show that they're here for the right reasons among everything else. And of course, we're also operating underneath the principle of we're wanting people to have a hand up, not a hand out, when it comes to like a lot of this stuff. And that's simply just the fact that a lot of these things, if you don't have somebody from like across the country who can be your support network, it can be a lot harder, because there's something to be said about a distributed network of friends who are able to directly support you versus having all of your community located on one area. So having a distributed network like that definitely builds an additional layer of resilience on it. As far as dealing with corrupt officials, the counties down here are very corrupt. They play by their own rules and they cover for each other. If you're not part of the good old boys club, you need to hurry up and get in it, especially if you want any sort of power, especially if you want something where there is legitimate power to be had, such as volunteer fire departments for unincorporated places, or sheriffs for the specific region for the counties, or if you have a specific town that you want to be in, you need to be basically like a pillar of the community. You need to be like the person who owns the church there. And if you are one of those things, then you will be able to magnify and force multiply any sort of relief effort down where you are 100-fold, and you'll easily take care of people.
Thank you very much. I would like to, second whatever you said about volunteer fire departments and sheriff's departments. Those are, particularly in local areas. And whenever you leave, Mr. Ford, I can directly address Mr. Wade Hampton's question that he asked a little bit earlier a bit better. but in the sense of what to get involved in and all that. But in terms of local politics, two of the best vectors to get started, especially if you're just a Joe Schmo, is those local sheriff's departments and incorporated communities and the volunteer fire departments, because they also kind of act as law enforcement in unincorporated communities.
Yeah. I'm basically running out of time. If you guys have any more questions, please just at me, and I will be able to answer them to the best of my ability. However, I am not terribly on X, formerly known as Twitter, because I am still doing stuff down here, and there is stuff to manage. Like, even in intense situations like this, you need to be able to iron out leadership structure 100% beforehand, because if you don't, then there's going to be team drama. And team drama is the number one thing that kills organizations out here, especially if they're doing things that are unsafe, especially if they're libtarded, and especially if they just don't know what frickin' time it is when it comes to helping people. So with that being said, I bid you all gentlemen a good night and have a blessed evening.
You as well. Thank you for sharing everything with us.
Can you guys hear me?
Hey, welcome.
Yeah, just had a quick question. So I'm in a position right now where I'm sort of between jobs, and if I wanted to see if there's an opportunity to make myself helpful out in North Carolina, um, what would be a good point of contact for that?
Well, because I know who you are, I'm going to add you to the Telegram chat right now. But for anybody listening, you can reach out to us at the Old Glory Club, and we can put you in contact with the locals that are down here. I know the Red Truck Men, Samaritan Purse, and a couple other organizations have been putting together anybody. They can organize people into volunteer squads, and I think the guys that actually live in the area can expand more on that.
Sounds good. I'll look forward to that Telegram invite.
Well, fellas, I think we've pretty much covered everything. Is it time to close up?
Yeah, I think we've covered all of our topics. Unless there's any last minute statements anybody or questions anybody would like to ask.
Nothing really.
Which? Okay.
Well, yeah, the only thing I've got, it's been mentioned before, but yeah, sorry, just finally got the kids to bed, guys. So for those of you that heard Zelda in the background every time I'm muted, you're welcome. And but yeah, if you're interested in joining any of the OGC chapters, please reach out to the Old Glory Club, and they'll get you squared away. And if you're in North Carolina, we will, you shoot us an email. We will do our best to get back with you as quickly as possible. But that's all I have on my end.
Once again, I'm Harvey Wallbanger, president of the Vetus Dominium Club, the Virginia chapter of the Old Glory Club. Links to contact us are on my profile. In there, you will find a link to our chapter's website page on TheOldGloryClub.com, as well as a link to email us. And we want to hear from you and join up right now. Do it now. Support the Old Glory Club. Donate to the Old Glory Club right now.
All right. Well, if that's it, then we're thankful for for everyone who showed up. Thank you to our guests and to all of our speakers, for all of our listeners as well. And we hope you guys have a good night, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on.